Welcome back, everyone, to The Price of Business. Your guest host today is Bill Knapik. That's me, and we have a great guest, another great guest. His name is Lee Kravetz. He is an author of a great book. It's called Supersurvivors. Lee, thank you, and welcome to the show.
It is a real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
First of all, Lee, that name just grabs you, Supersurvivors. I love it.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's one of these things where, I was doing some investigation into how people bounce back after traumatic, events and suffering in life. And, what happened was there's this thing where people don't just bounce back, they bounce forward. They really change their lives. And I was like, these are not just survivors, these are super survivors. Very
interesting. In fact, I saw one of the quotes from the book, when life hands you lemons, what do?
That's right. Well, that's a kind of a classic saying, right? When life hands you lemons, what do? Well, frankly, life does hand you lemons. The stats are something like 80% of us will experience at least one big trauma in our lifetime. It could be anything from a health crisis to a natural disaster. And people are able naturally to turn that around. Yes, they do suffer. Yes, they go through the heartache and the depression and the anxiety. But there's another really amazing stat that 80% of people who have traumatic experiences also naturally grow in some way. The sky is bluer, the grass is greener, and people are actually able to purposefully change their lives in meaningful ways afterward.
And as I was looking at something written about your book, where it says this book explores the science behind why people not only bounce back, but they bounce forward. Give us an idea of that science that's involved.
Well, sure. So, there's what we come up with in the book is it's something called grounded hope. Grounded hope, it's a two-part kind of equation, and the science really shows that this is accurate. What happens is, people who really bounce forward, what they do is they look at their situation with wide open eyes. They don't paint a smiley face over it. They say realistically, yes, I did. I lost a leg in a car accident. I survived cancer. I survived a hurricane. I really did have this near-death experience, and there's no way to sugarcoat that. It's absolutely true. But the second part is where it gets really interesting, and that's the hope part of grounded hope. And that is, you say, well, given the fact that, this has just happened to me, what can I do? What are things that I can do? What is in my power? And that's where people wind up doing some really remarkable things. One of the first people I met was a guy named Alan Locke, who at a very early age went blind. And this is after he had spent most of his young life working to be in the British military. And he had worked for years and years and years to do it. And at the age of 25, he developed macular degeneration and went blind. And, he said to himself, there's no way to sugarcoat this. I am not getting my vision back. No matter how positive I think, no matter what I do, there's nothing I can do to get my vision back. But what can I do? And in his case, he said, well, I know I'm a sailor. I know the ocean really well. I'm going to be the first blind person to get into a rowboat and row across the Atlantic Ocean. And that's what he did.
Well, it's interesting. It sounds like, I guess, that old phrase, reality check. And we're not talking about people that lost a job or went through a divorce or even lost a girlfriend. You're talking about serious situations that people are able to overcome and to really bounce forward. So it's interesting that, you got to take stock, the reality check, but it sounds like these people do that and then they bounce forward.
Well, yeah, the truth is, most of us will experience one major, maybe even two major traumas in our lives. That's a sad fact about life. But at the same time, this formula is something that most people wind up applying to even just suffering in life. It can be a divorce. It can be a breakup. It can be financial loss. We just went through a major, recession that affected most people around the world in some way, shape, or form. And that suffering was very, very real. And, applying this kind of grounded hope, the science behind it, into our daily lives, it's one of those things that has actually elevated people and caused them to take stock in their lives and say, okay, well, what is truly important to me? Given where I am right now, yes, I went through a divorce. Yes, I went through a breakup. I lost a lot of money. Given that, what can I do with my life? And that's where you see some amazing stories of resilience.
That's fascinating. And Lee, what was your inspiration to put this book out
there? Yeah, well, I personally, excuse me, I went through a personal crisis when I was in my late 20s. I became a cancer survivor. And obviously this threw me for a loop. I was fairly young. And for me, it wasn't the treatment that was the hardest part. For me, it was actually the hardest part was bouncing back, like getting back to living again. And, I found myself in New York City. I was working in marketing and public relations, which I thought was a fairly fulfilling existence. But when I came out of my cancer experience, I said, I can't go back to doing what I was doing before. It just doesn't seem meaningful anymore. I know how short and precious life is. What can I do that's meaningful to me? And I wound up moving from New York back to San Francisco, which is where I kind of originally started out. And I went and got a graduate degree in psychology. And I said, there's this thing called post-traumatic growth, and that's exactly what I just experienced. The idea that after trauma, I suffered, but I also grew in some way. I decided to change my life and get go back to school. I think this is something that's worth writing about. And the more I started talking to people, the more I saw how just uncommon this post-traumatic growth phenomenon really is.
And very, very interesting, because when we have setbacks of any level, small or large, they are opportunities to grow. And I think people need to be reminded of that, because a lot of times you're in the depression of it or the sadness of it that you really need to be reminded, right?
Well, the funny thing is, even if you're not reminded about it, even if you are wallowing in depression and anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder, which is very, very real and very serious stuff, naturally our minds will latch on to post-traumatic growth. It's one of those things that just kind of happens naturally, but it's not something we talk about often. It's not something that is kind of pointed out to us. But it's true. Experience, any sort of trauma or setback, and the next day when you realize that you are alive and you're breathing air and you're surrounded by friends and family, that those friends and family mean more to you all of a sudden than they did just 24 hours earlier.
And I think, too, the title of your book, Supersurvivors, that in itself is great encouragement for people to realize that they can be a super survivor. Lee, tell people how they can get the book and also your website, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Well, the book is it's everywhere. You can get it at your local independent bookstores. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon. It's on audiobook. It's on Audible. So pretty much anywhere. I think it's, last I saw, the paperback just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's at Target and pretty much anywhere you can buy a book. And you can also find out more about the book and what we're writing right now at www.supersurvivors.com.
Very nice, Lee. Well, what lies ahead for you? You have another book in the works?
I do. I'm working on a book right now that's about a strange psychological virus that took place that kind of started spreading here in Northern California. So I'm not going to give away too much yet. But it's coming out in about 2 years.
We'll be on the lookout for that. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lee Kravetz, Supersurvivors.com. Thank you so much, Lee. Enjoy that California heat.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to The Price of Business with Bill Knapik, sitting in for Kevin Price. We're going to take a short break. We're coming right back.